So I was supposed to make a montage video and put it up like this weekend, but turns out I suck, so I don't really have enough clips for it. However, while switching languages for the game, I realized how peculiar the dubbing of Overwatch is. Before anything else, for those of you who didn't catch it for the accent, I am Spanish. Now, something you need to realize is that only about 35% of Spanish people know English, and barely 19% of them speak it fluently. Those may seem like decent numbers, but you need to realize that Spain is the third worst bilingual country in Europe, only above Hungary and Bulgaria. That means that there is a pretty high demand of voice actors and dubbers in the country. So high, in fact, that I am studying it as of now, to try and turn that into my job. And there are some pretty good voice actors out there. Big demand means that being good is rewarded. And although there is also a fuck ton of incompetent assholes in the profession, Spain is pretty high up there in its quality of dubbing. However, that quality is only seen in movies, series and similar. Spanish dubbing for video games has always been infamously bad, ranging from terrible translations and voice actors who had no clue about their character, to actors who just were plain bad at their job because the company itself didn't want to spend any money in good voices. This is due to extreme amounts of not giving a fuck, because there are a lot of companies who just don't care. An extreme example is Team Fortress 2, which made a terrible dubbing when it came out, but then didn't even bother to dub all the voice acting that came out in several updates after that. The result is that if you set the game to Spanish, half the quotes will be dubbed and half will be in its original language. And that's if we even have a dubbing for Spanish. And I'm not referring to games like Guild Wars 2, which is translated but not dubbed. I mean the game having a Latin translation which is just labeled as Spanish. For those of you who aren't really into languages, there is at least two different types of Spanish. There is the most extended one, which is spoken by most of the people here, excluding Brazil, and which is known as the Latin or South American Spanish. And then there is the one I and most of Spain speaks, which is called Castellano for etymological reasons that I won't get into right now. Now, I completely get why the Latin Spanish is the most well-known one, but I don't get why both Spanishes are treated as the same language. They are not! Oh, it's just a different accent, some may say, but it's totally not. There are a lot of differences in idioms and expressions. I've always considered Latin Spanish as Castellano Spanish, but filtered through the grammatical structures of English, because they are closer. And both me and, I don't know, Sombra, who speaks Latin Spanish, can hear the same sentence and understand it. However, while Sombra will think that it makes perfect sense, I will be like, I get the literal meaning of what you said, but I have no idea what it actually means. Boop, boop, boop.
Me agarraste en curva.
What does she mean? I grabbed her in the curve? But that makes no sense. Is he trying to confuse me? I don't understand. What does she mean? What does she mean? This is awful to such an extent that most of the time I don't even bother to check the dubbing out. I go straight for the English version. However, due to my IP and whatnot, most games set themselves automatically in Spanish, so I go and change that. And oh my god, what is this? Spanish EU? That means Europe! And there is a Spanish AL too? So I played for a while with the game in Spanish and dear lord, it's so well voiced. But here's the catch, it is not only well voiced, it's also amazingly translated. What I mean with this is that most games make literal translations from English, but Overwatch adapts expressions and colloquial idioms to the languages it is translated into, taking in mind not only the way to speak, but also the demographic of the game and how the language works for us. Here is an example. Farah's ult in English is
Justice reigns from above.
In Spanish, it is
La justicia llueve del cielo.
which translates to Justice reigns from the sky. Almost direct translation. In Latin, she says
Llueve justicia desde el cielo.
which roughly means justice is raining from the sky, which is the same as Spanish, except in a different verbal tense. You realize that in both versions of Spanish, above is replaced with from the sky. That's because even though I could say La justicia llueve desde arriba, which is a literal translation from the English version, and it would make 100% sense, the concept from above in English has an epic connotation, like I am above you, I am superior to you, I have the high ground that Spanish just doesn't have. However, from the sky in Spanish does have that same connotation. It's a very small change, but it helps a huge amount, giving both the character and the ultimate a lot of personality. However, that's not all. Other characters have more complex lines which mean different things and try to give a different message. Let's take Genji for example. In English he says, which makes no fucking sense because it's Japanese. When he's in the other team, he says, and indeed the Latin version is, which means now I am the dragon. However, the Spanish version radically changed because we will take that literally. For it to make sense to us, Genji will have to literally turn into a giant robot dragon, which, granted, although it would be cool as hell, isn't at all what he does. Instead, he summons an ancient magic power related to dragons, a power that is then absorbed into his katana. The Spanish translation is, which translates to taste the steel of the dragon god. And yes, this isn't at all what he says in English, but it sounds way more epic in Spanish and arguably in English too. Another example of saying the same thing with completely different words is Torbjorn. In English he says, the Latin translation is, which means magma core. Granted, it doesn't mean the same, but it has the same connotation. There is a core somewhere, and it is melting. In Spanish, however, we don't get that. Not only it would be hard to dub, because núcleo derretido, which is the direct translation, has way too many syllables for dubbing, it also sounds very weird, because you say molten to a Spanish person, and he will think of ice cream, not nuclear reactors going to shit. So, indeed, the nuclear reactor thing is what the translators went for. Torbjorn says, on his ult, which means nuclear fusion. It is expressing the same. There is some plutonium here in this turret, and I'm a poke at it so it goes mental and I get a play of the game. It is just expressed in a different culture slang. And let's get to our final example, Lucio. Now Lucio's ult is particularly bullshit for a translation point of view, because it makes no fucking sense in English either.
Oh, let's break it! Damn!
What? Let's break what down? Lucio, are you okay? No, the expression itself makes no sense because it's just an idiom, a slang way to say that the song is in its most epic point, something that we have all collectively agreed it means what it means. And you can cheat like the Japanese translators and just go with another English expression in English, or just take a similar expression from the language itself. In Latin, he says,
A mover ese cuerpo.
which means let's move that body. And in Spanish, he says,
A quemar la pista.
which means let's burn that dance floor, which is a slang for saying let's dance to a song that is really fast. Now that I think about it, the English connotation is this song is great, and both the Spanish's connotations are this song is worthy of me dancing to it. Maybe Spanish makes you dance? I wouldn't know, I hate dancing. If I wanted to pretend I had a seizure when listening to music, I would just listen to Smash Mouth. Still, nothing is perfect. Although the translation in Overwatch is indeed great, and it has an all-star cast in Spanish voice actors, it has some flaws that make me prefer the English original version. These flaws include some voices which don't really fit their character, like Mei, who sounds older than Mercy, or paradoxically, Sombra. And the fact that all the characters speak flawless Spanish. In the original version, lots of them have accents that accentuate their personality and show their nationality. That doesn't happen in the Spanish dub. Only 3 of my friends play Overwatch, and 2 of them have the game in Spanish, of which 1 have never even booted it up in English. I prefer the English version, but I put the game in Spanish when we play competitive and communication is more important. Then there is the third dude which has the game in fucking Japanese and doesn't give a fuck, but it doesn't matter, we've kind of come to terms with him being bad, we don't care. But, for example, Iron Sun didn't know that Mei was Chinese, because he has no accent! And when he told him, he was like, no way! Why? We have very interesting conversations. But in summary, although I like the English version a little better, I am proud of Blizzard for offering such a good representation for both Spanishes. We even got maps for each of our cultures. We have Dorado for South America, and we have Gibraltar for Spain. Yes, I don't care about that city flag, Gibraltar is in Spain. Look, you can even see the Spanish coast if you look there.
Tactical visor out.